Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Future Academy channel. Today, we're going to be talking about typography. It's one of my most favorite things to talk about because it's the foundation of all good graphic design. And joining me today live are my two cohorts, Mark Contreras and Jonah, who are calling in remotely, managing this. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hello. What's up, guys?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Future Academy channel. Today, we're going to be talking about typography. It's one of my most favorite things to talk about. Sorry about that, guys. Did you guys hear that?
I heard it.
No. Okay, that sucked. Let me close that window. I want to chat with people, but I'm not going to do it now. Turning off everything. Okay. All right. So, Jonah, how's it going? Holding down the fort at the office here. And just in case you guys are wondering what the heck's going on, everybody has been allowed to work from home, encouraged to do so. Some people feel like the office is a better place to be and safer place to be than their apartment with their friends. So that's what's happening. Jonah's in the conference room. Jonah?
Sure am.
Looking a little dark.
Yes, sir. Me and all my friends over here.
You have your one fan.
My one fan.
Your
Number one fan.
Okay, and we're joined today by a whole bunch of people. Can we get a group shot here?
Yeah, there you go.
There we are. Everybody just wave and say hello. Yay, all right. Woo! We see a lot of familiar faces, people who have been on the channel before, and we're going to get going. So we're going to jump into the typography critique. And today I'll be using Adobe Illustrator. Hopefully I'll be using it correctly. We'll see. And you guys are all very smart. So if you see something I'm doing that isn't right, you guys let me know. Now, in case you were wondering what the heck this is and how you participate in part of this, essentially everybody who's purchased this course and who's interested in submitting their work, there's the Typography 1 course here. And like all our products during this tough time, everything's been discounted. So if you guys enroll in the class, you could submit your work. We're going to try this thing out. Our plan is to do this for 7 weeks, but if it doesn't work out that way, well, we tried. And we know that there's a lot of people out there who are stuck at home, obviously, for very good reasons and want to learn. And so we're trying to set the bar to kind of show how other teachers or collaborators can work together, can have a conversation remotely, safely, and it could be just as good as the real thing. Now, before we get started, I want to talk to everybody about how to do this on your own. Obviously, there are a lot of people who haven't taken our course who want to get better at design and typography. So I put together a 5-point self-critique checklist for you. Okay, and it's part of the course, but just to quickly go over it. When you're doing your design work, especially when it comes to type, you want to pick one focal point. And you're going to hear me talk about this over and over again. What am I supposed to look at? You as the designer, you're supposed to control that experience for the reader and say, hey, this is important. And you can see that it's subjective because each designer can pick something that they think is more important than something else. And I'm okay with that. But we need to make a decision, pick one thing. So every time we come upon a layout and you see too many things that we're looking at, you're going to start to think, oh, we have to reduce this. And we can, there's a lot of design techniques that you can use to help draw the eye towards one thing. Next is you want to think about order. What am I supposed to read first, second, and third? The primary, secondary, and tertiary read, as many people have referred to this in the design and art world. So think about the order and how it flows. Now, at least in the United States and America, we read from the top left corner. We read from left to right, top to bottom. Just remember that. Left to right, top to bottom. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of layouts where it's going to be a little confusing because I don't know what to read next. Now, if you follow all the rules and all the rules we've laid out, you're going to create something that feels really solid, but it's going to lack that little something extra, that element of surprise, the unexpected. So typography is about repetition and contrast. So repetition is the order. Contrast is that element of surprise. In the world of cooking, it might be you're eating something that's like a soup, but then there's a little bit of a crunchy thing like a deep fried onions that are thrown on top. That's a little element of surprise. So the soup is wonderful, but that little crunch has good mouthfeel. That's what we're looking for in the designs. Number 4 is negative space, that a lot of designs tend to crowd everything on the page and give us no room to breathe. And I'm going to show you one very simple, super, like after I show it to you, you're like, why didn't I do that? Well, this is what this is about. It's a learning opportunity for all of us. Just make sure you have some negative space to let your design breathe. And the last thing that you do is you check for the details. Were there any typos? Did everything line up correctly? Is something off by 2 or 3 pixels? So we do this in this order, 1 through 5. We don't start with the details because overall, if we don't have a strong focal point, if there isn't a clear read, if they're not elements of surprise and enough breathing space, the details at that point don't matter. We work in this way. All right. Now I'm going to jump around and I'm going to pick somebody. Who we're supposed to go with first?
Tom Francisconi.
Tom. Okay. So here's Tom's work here. So this is Tom. Hopefully I spelled your name right, Tom. So Tom's online with us right now. We've asked everybody to submit 3 layouts. Now, theoretically for your homework, you're supposed to do 10 and you picked your best 3. So let's get right into it. Okay. And I'm navigating using the keyboard shortcuts. And if I move too quickly, somebody just let me know what's going on. So the first thing I want to do is look at the layout. And you're going to get an impression like, does this feel right? Does it feel like it can breathe? Is there a focal point? All that kind of stuff. So looking at this layout here, it's clearly that he's pulled out design. And I see that right there. Let me pull up my layers palette here. Ooh, okay. So there's a lot extra going on here. Okay, we'll lock the foreground element here. So he's pulled out design. So that's very clear that he wants us to look at this. And we're going to read from top to bottom, left to right. So this is the next thing that we're looking at right here is the Journal for Graphic Design. I think this is an overall very clean layout. It's very easy to read and to look at. And I think by orienting everything on a 90-degree angle like this here, he's further separating. Why can't I select this? There we go. He's further separating this group from this group. I like it. And if some of you guys don't know what we're doing today, they were all given a set of words to work with. You must use all of it. You can use more of it, meaning you could duplicate it, but you can't use less than that. You can't just arbitrarily delete information. And we're allowed to use Helvetica, and we're only allowed to use 1 point size and 1 weight. So let's look at what point size this is. It's 8-point type. Okay. All right. And he's using Helvetica New, Neue, Regular. All right. I think that's pretty cool. Very successful layout, Tom. There's not much I would change on this. I think it's really nice. There's one little thing that bothers me just a little bit. I'm not sure if I can improve it, but let's try. And a lot of design, and especially while we're learning, is to try something. And if we do something that doesn't work, we just hit undo. So what I'd like to do is move it down a little bit and see if this helps it or not. And what I'm bothered by is this. I'm going to draw a little box here.
And again, the objective here is so that you can learn to break down things and see.
Yeah. So right now you can see that the margins between the vertical and the horizontal are a little bit different. We can make them the same or not, but what I'm going to do is I want to show you something, okay? I'm going to take this, this entire grouping here. I'm going to try to move it up and take a look at it. And I'm going to also move it down. So through the extremities, we start to learn what works and what doesn't work. Okay. So I want you to try that. And you could also try pushing it over to the right as well to see if that improves your layout. Does increasing the amount of, let me get my brush here. Where are my brushes? I had this all set up. Huh. Okay. So I'm going to get my brushes. Oh, that was a different one. Okay. That's right. It was my composite file. If we increase this space here and decrease this space here, we can create more interesting and dynamic contrast between the two. What you want to try to generally avoid is things being even. So if I take this and move it back here, you'll start to see that proportionately, the amount of space here is going to be similar to the amount of space here. And you may not recognize this kind of in your eye, but you feel it as you look at the design. So that's what I want to do. I want to push things around and see if I can improve it. This is a very good layout, Tom. I think you did a great job. This is, I'm just walking you through things that you can try on your own, okay, to push things around. Okay, these two layouts are a little less successful for me. And there's a couple of things I want you to try here because I see that you're using this grouping here. Did you increase it? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you did. Okay. Now in this one, it's a little harder for me to figure out what you want me to look at. And before I told you guys about your the tools that you can use, despite us being limited to 1 point size and 1 weight, there's still a lot that we can use through spacing and repetition. And I'll tell you what I mean. first I'm going to hide this, okay? I'll hide that, which is Command 3. If we took this and we brought it closer, proximity communicates like grouping, like these things belong together, right? But if I were to take this and move it farther away, you're going to start to see like they're still grouped in a way that they align to this axis right here. They align here, right? I have to, oh shoot, I don't want to do that. Okay, they align here, but by pushing it farther away, I make it so that you can't ignore this one element. So now this becomes the clear focal point. That's read number 1. This would be the second read, and then this down here would be the third read. We have to still contend with this group. So the problem I have with this layout, let me undo everything here. The problem I have with this layout right now is that these things don't seem to be connected to this at all. It's almost like two families. Like there's the family, the Johnsons over here, and then the Smiths over here. And in design, you want to try to bring these things together. Well, how can you do that? Well, you can try by bringing some of this on the same axis over here. Like pretend that that lined up there. That makes a different kind of layout, a different feeling. There's other things that you can do. Perhaps you could try pulling this over to the right and getting this to line up. But you want to have some kind of relationship between these things. Otherwise, they feel they're in completely different universes. Okay. And the last one here. Oh, you know what? You may have the old assignment here, Tom, because the new assignment is Resonate, right? So we modified the assignment just a little bit. So in case you're doing this and you're going to participate with us every single week, do your best to use the new type. Okay, it's designed to help make the typesetting easier for you. Originally, I gave this assignment to use this exact amount of copy, but I found that people were struggling with it, so I made it a little bit easier. So take a look at that. Okay. Overall, nice job, Tom. I'm going to close this file here. All right. Do we have somebody else who we have to talk about next?
Nope. Whoever you want to select next.
Oh, my computer's freaking out now. It just was waking up. All right. So let me try this person here. Okay. This is Ina Riddick. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I know I butchered it. And these are the 3 things that you submitted. I can already tell right now, you should use the template that we provided to you because everybody that did, their files look like this. It is important for you to look at it like this versus the way that you did it, okay? Oops, now I'm going the wrong direction. Ah, I've lost it. Sorry, guys. Is it this one? Yeah, all right, we're back here. I wanted to really focus on this layout in particular here. I think there's some really interesting things going on. Now, I'm pulling out layouts, not because they're good or they're bad, but because there's something for me to talk about. So just because I pick on your work, it doesn't mean that I hate it or I love it. It's just a learning opportunity for all of us, okay? What I like about this layout, there's some problems here, is that you're using a much bigger point size and you're also using the oblique weight here, I believe. Yeah, Helvetica New, no, yeah, bold, italic, okay? It's actually oblique, not italic, but that's kind of interesting. Okay, anyways, it's okay for things to cut off the edges the way you've done. And I want to encourage everybody that's designing to respect the edges, but then also push beyond that. What I don't like about this layout is there's some strange, oh, I know what it is. You see the letter spacing here? You have some big letter spacing and then you have some smaller one. It's because the type has been force justified instead of just left justified. So when you force justify it, it expands all the type to fit the edges, okay? And we want to generally avoid that because it creates these things called rivers. So what you're seeing here, let me get my brush pen out here. You're seeing bigger gaps and then you're seeing smaller gaps. And it's kind of arbitrary what's happening here. And you as the typographer, you want to control that. I don't know why, but our eye tends to focus not only on the material you put on the page, but also the negative space, the shapes that are created in between, like these shapes here. You just need to pay attention to that. So I think in general, without a doubt, if you're just getting started in design and you want to improve your typography, justify everything left. Just do it. It works better. It's easier to read and it's more pleasing to the eye. So I would start doing that. Now, you're losing the cutoff, the edge part, which is totally fine because all you have to do is then take this type and cut some of it off. And it's implied that there's more there. Okay, there's other things that you can do. Now, this is revealing a problem of you not using our template, is because now you're seeing the edges bleed beyond here, and it's creating a different feeling than it would have if it's cut off. And I'll show you what I mean. If I take this layout, which I'm going to copy this and go to my composite file. Okay, I'm going to grab one of my templates here. I'm going to just drag it down. This is not going to be perfect because my artboard, I can change my artboard. Okay, I'm going to delete this part. And I'm going to lock. Not going to do it now. Okay, there's your type. It's in a different layer. So you see what happens now is we have a lot more freedom to move your layers around, your type around, and it's going to be masked off. So please, if you're taking the course, there's already a template, just use it. I don't know why you wouldn't. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay, so let's see what we can do to make this layout a little bit more pleasing. The problem with the layout as it stands right now is there's a lot of stuff happening all over the page. And what we want to do is pick one focal point, like what's the most important thing to you right now? And it's hard to tell. It's like there's this resonate, the title, the masthead for the magazine. And then there's the subhead or the, I forget what that's called. And then there's all this information. It's really hard. So it's really hard for us to distinguish what is important, what is not. Oof. Let me get this back to normal here. There will be a time and place for you guys to really experiment with type and push the boundaries. I think in the later stages, once you have a better handle on how to use type, that's the time for that. So we have all kinds of weird spacing in here. Give me a second while I work on that. And Mark, if somebody has a question, just let me know, okay?
Yep.
Yeah. I see why you did that. Okay. And again, justify left. And hopefully when I've finished this part, now if you have resonate here and you pull it out just by a little bit, that's all you need to do to make this thing stand out and pop. Okay. You can group this with this if you wish, or you can bring it down and make it grouped with this. So if you keep working on this, this should start to look like something. Here's another tip I want to share with you guys. You see right here, January, February 2018. That information is kind of hard to work with right now. But if you were just to change this to numerals or something else, it'll be a lot easier for you to work with. And it'll look different. So something about numbers, I just love the way numbers and other characters look besides the alphabet. It just brings a different visual element to the page. Now, again, if you wanted to, you could do an underscore here. You can do an M dash. Oops, that's not an M dash. You can do a colon. There's a lot of different things you can do to try to break this information up. You can space this out. You can even bring this to the top. Shoot. And then move this down. So some things for you to play around with and think about, okay? So my key takeaway for you right now is make sure you use the template, move away from force justifying the type because you're losing control over the spacing. You're creating a lot of rivers. And then to really try to find one focal point. What is that thing that's going to make this thing interesting? And then design everything else around that. All right.
Chris, we had a quick question.
Go ahead.
So Kyle Daly is asking, is there ever a point to using the paragraph to force justify?
Oh, good question. Okay. There is, and it usually happens around newspapers, like newspapers and some magazines like to force justify. I don't know why they do, and they like to have that. And you have to spend a lot of time working the words and doing paragraph breaks so that they look good. A lot of times writers can do this, and then they'll change the way that they write the words. But if you're given words from somebody else, obviously you need to respect the text you were given, and you're not supposed to change the text if it's some writer's work. It's like somebody else changing your design. So I find that it's very rare that there's a reason to force justify your text, except for when I see it in newspapers. It's a standard. They do it. You don't have to do it. I guess for them, it looks a little neater when all their columns line up. Okay. Thanks for that question. So we're going to move on to Ronan Buckley right now. Let's take a look at Ronan's work. Is Ronan Buckley on? Okay. There's a bunch of things going on here. So Ronan, the first thing I notice on this layout here is you're pushing all of your design elements to the edges. Okay, and I'll talk about why you generally just don't want to do that. Now, an analogy I've used before, and if you're a fan of the show, you've heard me say things like this. Imagine this as the layout of a room, like the floor plan, and you're looking at it. Very rarely would you ever design a room and take all the furniture and push it all the way to the edges, like the bed, the bookshelf, the nightstand, all these things. And that's how it kind of feels. It's like we're just pushing everything to the edge and we're not utilizing the entire space. Okay. So we're going to look at more layouts. This is not one of your more successful layouts. And there's a lot of things that you're doing here. You're putting some names in the darker or more transparent gray, which you're allowed to use, right? Different tints and shades and transparency, totally legitimate. But I think it's the idea that you're pushing everything to the edge. If there's nothing else on this page, and I'm going to try to do this right now. Like that would look really handsome. Just resonate January, February 2018. Oh shoot. These things really should be like one group and not three things, because it makes it hard for us to adjust the leading. I would have just moved the leading in a little tighter, but now I'm kind of doing it manually, which is not the way you want to do this. Okay. Like that would look really good. Now we have a different problem. It's like we have to design the rest of the page. But taking all these things, pushing the edge, not a big fan of that. You're not utilizing the entire space that you were given. Probably of the three layouts that you submitted, I think this is your most successful one here. Just taking a minute to look at it here. Journal for graphic design. Okay. I like this. This is quite successful. So this group of information, oops, how come I can't draw a straight line? Anyways, this group of information lines up on one axis and it's good, it's strong. You pull that resonate above it all and you've broken it into different groups, right? So features, I don't know why there's features twice here. You probably don't need that. Okay. And then there's this, whoa, holy cow. Okay, so this was individually placed here. Okay, a little bit of work there. So Journal for Graphic Design, this becomes almost like an illustration, a grid, a dot pattern, and I like it because it breaks up this. You can almost say like, this is obviously a group, this is the second group that you would probably see, and this is the third group, depending on how you're seeing it. But because you've kept everything relatively small, you've created a lot of white space or negative space for yourself around these areas, and so that your eye has opportunity to move around. If you use a larger point size, it would be much more difficult to do a layout like this. So you're going to see in some layouts, all I'm going to do is make the point size smaller, and you're going to see the feeling of how you perceive it is improved. Okay. So this is probably your best layout. I like this treatment. Probably a little bit more we can do here in terms of figuring out the file's built in a strange way here. Let me group this. So I wonder if bringing it closer to this or farther away would make it more or less interesting, and seeing if we can get this to like 3 groups instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Okay. Good job. So don't save. Back to this here. Okay. This is Bertram Christofferson. Is that right? Bertram? Yeah. I like this. I like that you're trying different ways to deal with the masthead, from breaking up like this, resonate, and writing it all the way out, and then resonate with the divider line, and then resonate with like a bullet point in between. I encourage everybody that's working on this to go ahead and explore different ways of treating the masthead, because we can deconstruct and reconstruct it in different ways, which will give us some options. Okay. A couple of things I see here. Aside from you doing the masthead differently, I'm noticing that you're using the same elements a little bit too much. Like, for example, this is literally that, but just with less spacing, right? When I put them next to each other, and we can try to do it in more different ways. And the more you explore, the more you try, the more you fail, the more you're going to learn in this whole process. Okay. So I'm going to encourage you to try to break up your groups a little bit differently so that there's more ways of interpreting this information. Oh, this has been outlined already, huh? Yeah, let me look at this. Okay, in the future, I'm gonna suggest that you don't outline your type unless you're using some exotic cut of Helvetica that very few people are gonna have. I have Helvetica, I have Helvetica Neue, and I also have Helvetica Now. And so if you're using Newhouse Grotesque or some other version of Helvetica, I'm not gonna have it, but I can't work on your file, unfortunately, okay? There's no way for me to break this information up differently. One thing that I would suggest that you try, and we've seen other people do it successfully, is to take this list and make it a paragraph just to see what options that opens up for you. Another thing I'm going to ask you to try, explore, is to take this and make it bigger, like a bigger point size, just so you get the feel for like how to deal with the information, and we can learn a lot from that. And I want you to try it in a different weight. So those of you guys that are trying this layout at home, I'll show you what I mean. Res, then Nate. Let's say we do that, right? Character, Helvetica. I'm going to use Helvetica Now display. And I'm going to use the light or thin weight. So if you buy the complete font family from Monotype on Helvetica Now, you'll notice that I have so many different weights. Can you guys see that? Look at it, it's doing a little dance on the screen, shimming towards us. And that opens up a lot of options.
Can you lower that down, Chris? I think it's being covered by your pop-up.
I don't know what we're talking about. Say again, Jonah.
Can you lower down that font box thing? Yeah.
Character box?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, most definitely. Let me put the paragraph controls in here too. Okay. Yeah, so if you guys see, if I highlight this, you can see like I have a lot of different weights to work with, all the way from hairline to extra black. So the point of all this was to encourage you to try different weights. Like, don't just use 8-point type Helvetica regular. Try something in bold. Try something even extra bold or black. This extra black. And you're going to start to get a feel for how to use the different weights, and you're going to learn so much more. Okay. I just want you to encourage that, because as I look at this, it looks like you're using Helvetica just regular weight the entire time. And they're all almost all the same point size. So you're not going to experience as much in terms of exploring the different point sizes and weights. Okay. Now you're only allowed to use one point size and one weight per layout, but not for your entire set. So maybe that wasn't clear. All right. I can't work on this file too much because it's already all outlined, and I don't want to go through and move each character by hand. So let me close that file. Don't save.
And just to fill people in if they're just joining, so what we're doing here is we're going through an exercise from our Typography 01 class, and they were given a specific set of texts, and the goal here is to learn how to break down text and see based on priority and hierarchy. So Chris is going through the exercises from the students in the class.
Yes, thanks, Mark. All right, this is from, I don't know how to say this. Is it MLS or Emily Vastakis? And we're gonna just look at our layout right now. Or I don't know if it's a man or a woman, so sorry if I messed that part up. I see, so very similar things here. Everybody's using just that one. Let me lock the foreground mask here. Okay. And this is 12-point type. Okay, I'm gonna suggest that you all try to do something. It's strange, but the way that computers are set up, the default font and the point size is terrible. Usually it's terrible. And the default typeface is usually something like Myriad if you're on the Mac, and it's 12-point type. I don't know why it's like the worst point size to work with, or maybe because we see it so much that it just becomes really boring to us. So in this case, I'm going to take this. Let me duplicate this before I do that. All right, we'll put it to the side for now. Take this, and I'm going to change the point size. I'm going to change it to 8 point. And you'll notice now, without changing the layout at all, by just changing the point size to 8 point, we create so much more space for our eye to move around. And I don't know about you, but for me, the layout feels like it's easier to breathe just because there's more negative space. And so that's why I want to encourage you to try that. Conversely, if I take this and I try to make it like 14 or 16 point type, it creates a different feeling. It feels more like a poster or something else. It feels less precious. And you'll want to just push this around. Okay. So all I'm doing is changing point size there. This is a pretty good layout by my judgment here. And the reason why I like it is because it's not trying to do too much. When you have a lot of constraints, like one point size, one weight, there's really not that much you can do. So don't go and try to make some crazy things in there. Okay. There's good hierarchy and alignment here. That resonate is connected to the descriptor there. So it's resonate in the Journal for Graphic Design. That makes a lot of sense. Those are grouped horizontally like that. And then the rest of the information is grouped on a vertical axis. We probably need to play around with spacing. Like, let me try if I bring this down. I'm just eyeballing this here. We probably should be working with some kind of grid. And I want to shift it because the other thing that you want to try to do is avoid these middle spots. Like I said before, you see this proportion or that amount of space? It's not that different than this amount of space. So I want to push and pull. So if I were able to take this and push it here, that becomes a more interesting layout, or the opposite way, which is to try to push it here. So when you guys have a grid, try to go not in the middle. Okay, so if I take this, I'm going to just try to go on one side. Maybe that's more interesting. I don't know. Or I go the other way. And you may find that the spacing between the resonate and the rest of this column of text might be too far away. So you bring it in closer, and that gives you a lot more options now. Okay? Some things to think about there. Yeah, so what I'm seeing here, and I want to encourage you guys for the next pass at this, is to try to break up your text in different ways. When I look at these two, they're almost the exact same layout, except for they're done with justified right type instead of justified left type, or flush left, flush right, right? So if you see in this issue, it's exactly the same breakup almost. And then the features here, it's just flipped. That's all it is. So I want you to try to explore it. Make some ugly layouts. Try to do the weirdest thing and then figure out why doesn't it work, and then fix that. And then you're going to discover a lot more. Okay. Closing this file. Okay. This is Yoonji, who reminded me she's been on the show before. So I'm glad to see her work here. There's some pretty cool things happening here. So I think I know how to make this layout a little bit better. This confuses me a little bit. Because resonate is facing this way and the H should be connected to this. And I would appreciate it if this were just flipped around. So if I double click on this and type in 180 degrees, it should be facing the right way at this point. There's really no reason why you would make this upside down, in my opinion, because they're connected. Okay. You drop the baseline. And I think that's fine. And so you're going to start to see some layouts now where people are taking what is normally a layout like this, and then they're rotating it. And sometimes rotating off axis like that gives it a little kind of dynamic energy. It feels unsettled, off kilter. So you want to make sure the layout works first before you rotate it, that you kind of understand the principles of design, because it just makes it a little harder to work with. Because you have less space to work with. Okay. But I think in terms of the layouts that you submitted, this is your most interesting layout. And I think once we start to open up the parameters, you'll have a lot more options to work with. For example, you could have taken this in the coming weeks where you can make it a lot bigger, and it creates a lot more visual interest than you have right now. So let's try this again. Let's take this. It is also 12 points. Let's try 10 point. And how it opens up the space. And you're using bold here. Let's try light and see what happens. Oh, I can't seem to switch it. Okay. What is going on? I see. Yunji, you also have Helvetica now? It seems like you do. That's cool. Do you have the entire family?
I think so.
You do? Wow. So
I'll send you the link.
Praying for it?
Of course.
Wow. Okay, that's very cool.
No, I didn't. I found it. That's why that's what I meant. I'll send you the link.
No, don't send me any illegal links.
Okay.
Yeah, we're friends with people on the monotype. I'm just saying, hey, I'm gonna pretend like this was not said, but all right. But you should try different weights, right? So text weight and display weight, etc. And to then look at light, bold, and regular, because just by changing that, you're gonna get a whole different feel, right? So don't stick to just one point size, one weight per layout. You have to stay to that, but in your exploration, you could try a lot of different point sizes. So let me see here, the Journal for Graphic Design. Okay, Yunji is doing something interesting here too. She's using all caps to separate this information from this, which is upper lowercase or title case, depending on how you look at that, right? Lester Beal. Did you spell Lester Beal right? Is that how you spell Lester Beal? Let's look at Kang. Let me just verify something. It is, okay. Whew, dodged a bullet there. All right. So I like the way that you've broken shoot. See, once you start putting something on an angle like this, it's really hard to keep things aligned. So like I was saying before, design it vertically and horizontally, get it right. And then as your last little thing, try to rotate it, because once you do that, it just makes it really hard to work with. There's some things here that you can really push. This is the one time where I think, hey, what if you were to push this right to the edge? Because this will glue it together. So it should be on the same baseline, which I'm having a hard time lining up perfectly, right? And I'll show you what I mean. Let me try to just use this. Draw a line. This is my baseline here, so I can connect this, okay? You should have this like right around here. That way your eye can complete that. Your eye will take us across there. And there's other things you can do that might be might be kind of interesting for you to play with, right? So they still follow the same axis, this grid, you know? What the heck did I just do? Okay, because I don't know, it's not lined up. Here we go. So guys, I'm winging this right now. I don't want to go through like the process of making sure those things line up. And now you might say, wow, I'm breaking that connection between resin and 8. That's where you can go back and type this in as EIGHT if that helps to create a stronger baseline to draw your eye across, okay? But I think that's probably like you can push that and try moving that up there, and maybe taking this and moving it a little closer to this. I'm not sure. I'm trying to also avoid the splitting the composition in half, because if you look at this, it is almost literally like in half here. If I take this and draw it like that, you see? You want to try to push it either to the thirds, like the 1/3 rule where, and I'll show you what I mean. We can take all this now, avoid this line, and just move it. There. And let me see if I delete this, what happens. So you try to go that way, and you could try to go the other way and see what you get. Okay, let's see here. These are pretty standard. Okay. Now I'm going to take a break from looking at the 3 layouts, and I'm going to switch gears here. I want to remind everybody that's tuning in right now, if you're interested in learning more about typography and you need a crit of your own, this is a 5-step process that you guys can follow to be able to critique your own work, is to choose a focal point. Choose one thing that's really important to you. It doesn't have to be the same thing every single layout. Try something different. Think about the order. And usually we talk about groups of 3 and then having a primary, a secondary, and tertiary read to introduce one element of surprise. You can see with Yunji, she was like pushing type and throwing things off axis and having a little bit of fun with that. I strongly encourage you to do that. Just reducing the point size and playing around with the different weights of the fonts that you're using can create a lot more negative space or reduce negative space, but in a very intentional way. And then finally, we get into the details. Since this is the first week that we're critiquing this work, we are not focusing too much on the details because I think there are some bigger, broader problems that we're trying to resolve. Let me jump in here. I went through all the submissions and I copied and pasted some of the layouts here for us just to talk about, okay? Now I'm gonna talk about this one right here. This is from Lars Pell. And very nice layout. You can see that it's off axis, or not off axis, I'm sorry. It's pushing away from the center line, which is right here. And Lars is using these black lines in here, which make the layout look really good. The only problem is we're not allowed to use lines right now. So Lars's instincts are like, this needs something. I want you to create visual interest without adding additional elements at this stage. So this one is like one of those strikes, right? Where a good layout, but not following the rules. And for right now, you need to stay within the constraints that you were provided. And also here, we see another layout. This is from Christina Testana, and she's on the live call with us because I saw her earlier. Very similar to what Yunji was doing in tilting it off axis, creating very simple grouping here. And it's very strong layout. And I can tell that she knows how to use compositional elements. So she felt something was off. So you know how with Yunji's layout, which I've closed already, we put one of the letters up here and then she rotated the type. I could do it here. Just rotate it. Maybe I could do it more scientifically and rotate it like this. 90 degrees. Boom. Okay. So, oh, I see. So you kind of cheated, Christina, but you worked within the parameters. This is kind of interesting. We'll talk about this in a second. So with Yunji's layout, she had something like this, right? And then she separated, she divorced like one letter from the rest. And that is very similar to what Christina is doing, but just using type. So when you understand how to manipulate the type, you can create the same feeling as these lines that Christina is using, just with type. And perhaps Lars can figure out the same thing. And that's why having these constraints are really good at pushing your exploration and trying a lot of different things. Okay. Now, I was going to strike you with a foul here with adding these elements, but you just added dashes or minus signs. So I think you're still good within the parameters of what we're doing. I love that you're kind of found a legal way to cheat a little bit by adding lines. And I'm gonna say for next week, let's not do that. Okay. I think this is totally fine. It's actually a really nice layout. I like these elements that you've added because it creates visual interest. It pulls my eye across the screen, across the page, and that's usually something that you want. So she didn't feel compelled to fill the entire page, but by adding this line and this line, she activates the rest of the page, and I think that's really cool. And she also added this separator for the journal for graphic design. So you can see these dashed lines help to say, this is a different piece of information than the rest of this, even though it's the same point size and the same weight on the same grid point. So nicely done there, Christina. Okay, let me jump around here. Here's another one I want to look at. Okay, this is from James Flynn. I think James is in here as well, but I'm not sure. So James, you're also using the older typeset. So I apologize if you've taken the course before and you're submitting work to be critiqued. That's totally fine. But since then, we've updated the course. And if you haven't looked at it recently, you'll want to rewatch it because we added more critique videos and more tips on how to build stronger layouts as you're getting started. Okay. I saw an opportunity here to design something. So I'm going to lock this. Good. It's locked. All right. Is it? What is that? Okay. Anyways, the layer's been locked so we could design it. Okay. We have clearly 3 groups. We have hierarchy. We have 1, we have 2, and we have 3. And like I said before, I'm going to read from top to bottom, left to right. So my eye scans across the top, and I move bottom, and then I get to this point here. Okay, that makes sense. The problem I have with this layout is there's not a lot of relationship between these 3 things, James. And I want to try to find a way to make them tie together. And you can, the easiest and the strongest way to do this is to find a grid point, like a grid line like that, and get some of the things to line up. And another way is to get things to line up on that grid point. Okay. And if you guys are using grids, this is what the grids are for. They help to keep things ordered. If you take a bunch of things and you drop them on the floor, they feel chaotic, they feel messy, and doesn't look pleasing to the eye. The instant you put them in a box of like a gridded box, then all of a sudden all that chaos becomes a lot easier to process and it looks pleasing to the eye. And so that's what the grid will do for us. It'll allow us to organize things that don't necessarily feel as ordered as they want to be. So I want to move this out of the way. Okay. So I have an idea here. I think there's an opportunity here. Shoot. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this text first. I want to make it a part of this group. There's no reason why it needs to be in a separate group. All right. Now, generally speaking, when we look at type, and if I were to ask you to read these two pieces of information, the left side or the right side, and at least in America here or English speaking countries, you're going to say that probably this one's easier to read than this group. And why is that? Because when our eye is scanning the page, it's able to find this corner point and say El Lissitzky, Wolfgang Weingart, Alvin Lustig. Whereas this one, our eye has to work a lot harder. Let me get the brush here. It has to work a lot harder. Brushes, where are you? Yeah, it has to work a lot harder to find each and every one of these points. And after a while, if you're reading a lot, it becomes very fatiguing. And that's why, generally speaking, paragraphs are set like this on a straight line, so that it's easier for you to find the edges and to read the type. Now, having said that, there's still ways to make this work, right? Now, if I were to take these two pieces of information and to interlace them, there's a relationship that's created here. Now, this looks really hard to read. And the reason why it's really hard to read is probably this would be better if there was upper lowercase. It's just upper lowercase is going to be a lot easier to read because if you look at this, watch, I'll show you. We'll take Alvin, copy that. Actually, I have a better example. Okay. The example is this. And everybody that's driven on the freeway knows what I'm talking about or will know in a second. I'm going to make this bold. Okay. When you're driving down the freeway and you have a split second to figure out if you're on the correct ramp, north or south, and this is why there's a lot of accidents. Like I can't tell. I just can't tell because almost all these letters are the same. And here's why. It's because we recognize the shapes before we can read the letters, right? So if we were to bring this over and we were to try to do this in upper lowercase, you're going to start to see this. And it's still a very, very similar shape. So if we go further, if we just reduce it down to this and this, it's very difficult to mistake north from south because they have very different properties. And what I mean is this, if we were to take a pen and block this out, I'm going to block it out right now. I'm going to do this crudely. Okay. If you were just driving down the street and you had a split second to make a decision, you're going to know north from south because they have very different forms as opposed to these, right? This is a little bit better than this because if you were to drive down the street, it would look like this to you. And I think this is why there are people who are just jumping on the on or off ramp really fast because they just realize they're in the wrong lane. This is where design really does matter because design can kill, or at least bad design can kill. Right? You guys see the difference there? And then if I were to do this, it'd be very similar to this. I can block this out. Block this out. Mark, any questions?
Yes, we do. So we
All
got
right.
a couple coming up. We'll queue them up. So we got Kang, and then we've got Brian Butler coming up. So Kang, we'll unmute you. And go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, so when you're moving your type around on some of those layouts, were you thinking of just the relation in space, or were you kind of planning to use a grid afterwards?
Oh, okay. Good question. I've been designing for some time now that a lot of the grid is kind of pre-baked into my brain. But for a lot of you guys that are starting out, I would strongly suggest that you use a grid to help teach you about proportion, relationship, and repetition. And I'm moving them around based on many years, over 20 years of laying out type, that I kind of now instinctively know where to put stuff. Okay. Now, in the beginning of my career and my journey into typography, I was a slave to the grid. The grid ruled my life, and for good reason, because it made things make sense. So we can talk about the grid in a little bit. Did I answer your question, Kang? Was that Kang? Or was it something else?
Yep, that was King.
Okay, cool. Okay, was there another question? No?
Yep, we have one from Brian Butler here. Let me unmute him. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Brian, are you on?
Yep. Can you hear me?
What's up, Brian? We can hear you loud and clear, man.
All right. So if the primary goal of a piece is to communicate in a logical manner, if we need a focal point, then for like this example, should resonate consistently be the thing that we design so people would notice it first?
Yeah, very good question, man. Very good question. Okay. And the answer I'm going to give you, it may make you more frustrated than happy. Okay. Now, you could say that resonate should be, as the masthead of a magazine, this is like some kind of art journal, right? Should always be the focal point, like here, right? But in terms of like how we can interpret this information, if you're a longtime subscriber to Resonate as an art journal, you may care more about the contents. So like, who are the artists that are going to feature this week or this month? And then that may become more important. Or if you're a collector and you want to make sure that you're getting the February or February issue, then that may be the thing that you pull up and highlight. And for typography and what we're trying to do in this course and these exercises is to really start to say, this is important to me. I'm going to find a creative way to bring this to the top. And it's not always, should it always be Resonate? But I'm sure if you were becoming the creative director of the magazine, they would probably frown upon you for moving their masthead around so much. It would probably be bad form because people need to see that and say, yep, that's the magazine that I love. That's the one I want to buy. So you would confuse people. But for the sake of this exercise, pull anything out, try it and see what works. As long as you can find a reason why, in your mind at least, it is important to pull it out. So that's how I cut it right in the middle. So mostly yes, but not always. Okay. Any other questions?
Got a good one from YouTube here from Keyweb Concepts. So they're asking, when you talk about looking at layouts like blueprint or a floor plan, what do you mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good question.
Light on my face.
All right. Let me think about, okay, Mark, just let me know about that one. Remind me, because I'm going to find a layout where it's very clear what's happening, and then I'll talk about it, okay? All right, about the whole floor plan.
Yep.
Okay. All right. All right, so we were here, we're talking about upper lowercase and legibility. And, you know, legibility is really, really important until we start to get into experimental layouts. And then you can start to play around with it, because you're going to see that once you learn how to control type and make it interesting, that you can start to like really push the boundaries of legibility and still make it readable to people. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take this chunk here. I'm going to just move it out of the way. Move over here. Okay. So getting back to this, I still think that there's an opportunity here to lace this together, and I want to show you how to make it work. So first of all, these letters, because they're all caps, it starts to blend together in here. And I want to introduce you to some ideas, things that you can try out on your own. Okay. So what we can do is we can try to increase the leading, which is on the Mac, option down arrow, right? So I'm increasing both theoretically the same. And then we can try to lace it one way or the other and see if we can create something interesting. I think I'm battling the fact that it's hard to read to begin with, but we're not gonna give up yet. So if I hit Command Shift L, we'll justify it both on the left. So I can take this now and try and move it to the left here and create more options for you guys to look at. And hopefully this starts to open up your mind as to what you can do. In this layout too, I would suggest that, who is this? James, try to go 8 point. Okay, so I'm going to go 8 point. Oh, it was already small. Okay, 8 point. Now, let's say we were only allowed to use all caps. How do we create separation between these two groups, right? Yeah, we could do it like this, which is how a lot of people are doing it. But there's another way we can do it to create separation between these two groups. If I were to hit Option and the right arrow on my keyboard, I can open up the tracking and increase it to a point. And if I just keep doing that, where's my type here? I think it's here. If I did say 400, no, that's not enough. Let's say 750 to really open it up. Now you can see like, oh, there's no mistaking that this is one group and this is a different group, but they're kind of related because of their proximity to each other, right? So this is where I want you guys to play with your type to see if you can create something that's more interesting looking while still working with the parameters of the information you were given. Okay. Now I may decide, you know, features is usually it's the opposite of the way that you have this typeset. Usually features would be all caps and then Armin Hoffman would be upper lowercase. Okay. Anyways, I could probably increase the spacing between features in this just to visually separate it from that group. And now what I would do is then take this and move it over so it lined up with this. So now you guys get the feeling of this and how this is starting to feel a little different. So you can't change the point size or the weight for each layout, but you can change the leading and the tracking, which create a lot of different options for you, more than you thought. Okay. If I were to take this and decrease, you'll see that this becomes a lot denser on the page. So if I were to zoom out versus opening up the leading, it would feel more airy and light. Okay. And the last thing I need to do is to figure out how to make this work with this. So again, I'm going to switch this to justified left or flush left and see what else I can do here. It's not feeling totally cohesive and we'd have to really work on this to make it work here. But I kind of wanted to demonstrate with James's work, like other options, things that you can try and find success in. All right. Okay. Mark, how are we doing on time? Are we okay?
We're about an hour in, but we do have a question and then you want to move on to the next design.
Go ahead, ask your question.
Okay. So this one is from Bertram. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, how's it going?
Hello.
So I was just wondering, you know, when we're jumping into the design program, we're trying to align all the elements to these different grids.
Yeah.
And I was experimenting with like the golden ratio and like 7 columns and like 12 columns, all these different grids. How would you go about picking the grid for a project that fits the content? If that makes sense.
Yeah, good question. I don't think, okay, there's a lot to be made about grids. And I think in some cases people ignore them and some people worship them. And I don't think either is totally right. I think it's usually somewhere in between. Now I'm going to show you how to deal with this grid thing here. Let me unlock this layer. I'm going to delete this. I accidentally created something here. All right, I'm going to copy it over here. Okay. I don't think grids are conceptual. So tying that into giving it more meaning than it is. And we've seen people, friends of ours actually do golden section, golden ratio grids on top of everything. And it's actually, you're just making stuff up because it doesn't even line up. It's just like forcing a design that you like into following a grid system that doesn't even exist in the original. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? All right. So I'm gonna show you a grid right now. So this is a Fibonacci sequence, and the Fibonacci sequence is fantastic as a grid that's very dynamic. And I want to show you how to do that. Let me make this black. I'll make it blue. You guys can see that, right? Okay. Now, I want to repeat this across, and the easiest way to repeat it is to grab this and then just go like this and hit that and then hit Command D. It just duplicates it. Hopefully I've done this right so that it's correct. Like it's not misaligned. There we go. All right. So the Fibonacci sequence says you take two numbers and then you add it, and that equals the second number or the third number in the sequence. So it looks something like this. If I were to have my type tool here, and it would go like 1. Sorry, this is not in a place where you can see it. Okay, you guys know Fibonacci, right? So it's 1, and these are the two numbers you start out with. Okay, my tracking's out of control here. Back to 0. Okay, so you add up those two numbers, and it'll equal 2. You add up 1 and 2, it'll equals 3. And then 2 and 3 equals 5. 3 and 5 equals 8. And 8 and 5 equals 13. And 13 and 8 equals 21. And that's your Fibonacci sequence, okay? Now, this number, there's some very special things about this number sequence that was discovered. And so what we can do is we can use that. So I'm going to take all these things. I'm going to move it down. So I'm going to take 2 units. So there's 1, 1, and I'm going to move it here, right? So 1, 1. And then I'm going to do 2. So let me hit this so you can see a little bit better. And then 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's as far as I can go because I'm going to run out of space. So if you look at this ratio of blue blocks here, you'll see that it's actually very dynamic. So 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8, right? And we can leave the rest alone. And it's going to make sense in a little bit, not just yet. So if I scale this up, holding down Shift, oops, I need to drop the anchor point right here, hold down Shift, and make it fit on this page. Okay, if I were doing this like it mattered, like I got paid for this, I would spend a little bit more time working on this than now. And then I'm going to bring on my guides and hit Command R to bring the rulers out. And I'm going to snap it to that point. Can you guys see the guideline right there? I can go and change this color here. I like a less obnoxious, like really brilliant blue guide because it's overpowering sometimes. But in order for you guys to see it, I'm also, did it do it? Yeah. And then I'm going to do lines so you can see it very clearly now. Okay, you see that guide? So that's 1, 1, right? So I'm going to do it again. Snap it to this and just keep going. I'm sure somebody knows a faster way of doing this. I'm not that person today. Okay, so if I grab all these things now, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. I lost a piece. Let me group this. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this. Now I could start this. This is kind of like the decision that you have to make as a designer as to where this grid wants to start. And it's just something to help you, not something to enslave you, okay? Let's say like I like where this starts here. So now I'm going to pull grid lines down here. Everybody's following me so far? And when I start using this grid, you'll start to see like, wow, that's really how you use it. So I'm going to flip it using the mirroring tool, which is keyboard shortcut O, and holding down Option as I click on this, it'll flip it upside down, right? I'm going to flip it vertically. Oops, sorry, I meant the other way. Okay. Now I can also pull this grid so it could start here. So it repeats that direction, or I could do it like repeating here, but I think I'm going to try it here. All right. Everybody see the grid? Now I'm going to put this somewhere else. Get off my page. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add bounding boxes or grid lines for the page itself. Okay, there we are. So there's your grid. This is a Fibonacci grid, arbitrarily decided on the horizontal axis here. And you can see that. Now, if I were to place typography in these boxes and use this to govern how I'm going to do a layout, I'm going to show you, okay? So I'm going to switch my color now back to black. All right, I got black ink. So I were to draw a box. So the rule of using the grid is this, is that the first thing that you put on a page is arbitrary. It's the only thing that's arbitrary at that point. So why is it snapping to it? Okay, I'm going to put something down right here. Okay, that's the first thing. That's it. Now you have to make decisions based on that one thing that you put on the page. So if I say like, I want something to relate to that, I may want to create something here. And I want to create something down here. Okay, so this is how you use the grid system so that you can create dynamically proportionate things that kind of feel related to each other. And as soon as I add or change one element on here, it impacts the layout, the feeling of the layout. And if it feels off balance, then this first thing that was arbitrary needs to move. And this is the push and pull of typography and design. You put down that one dot, now you kind of have to move things around to make it work within that. So this will also teach you things like this. I'm going to show you something. Let me move this out of the way. Let me just delete that. You could take this sucker and you could put it over here. So I'm going to hide this right now. You can see like this will be related to this. This is related to that. This is not a terribly interesting layout. And this is to remind you, just because you use a grid doesn't mean it's good. It's just a starting point for us to work. Okay, now let's get back to that one question that was asked by people watching us live on YouTube. Like, what did I mean by floor plan? Okay, and this is what I mean. Imagine like this is the layout of your house. Okay, we're looking from a top-down point of view, like from a bird's eye view down onto your thing. And if you were to have like a dresser, a nightstand, and a bed or something like that, like how would you lay it out? And if you're really trying to make it interesting, you would try to kind of use the entire space. So there's a flow and a movement. You wouldn't necessarily just put the bed in this corner, the dresser in that corner. Unfortunately, this is how a lot of American households are laid out. And then this over here. It just would not make for a very interesting room. There'd just be a lot of space in the middle and not much else. But if we were to look at, say, a living room or something where you have a stand for the TV, some couches, you would start to lay it out. And you would start to kind of configure other furniture. Shoot. In a way that activates a space. So somebody walks into your home like, wow, that's really cool. Love the layout. And they're seeing things, and interior designers know this. Also, this works like if you were designing a grid pattern for a building, for example. And you see this a lot actually in modern architecture. Okay, this isn't exactly a line. Imagine now you're looking at the facade of a building. Instead of just having, let me delete all this. Let's say that you're looking at the facade of a building. It's like an office park somewhere. Right? And that's how a building looks. And you're going to see a door here. If I can get that tool right. There's your office building with retail space on the ground floor. This is why I tell you guys that typography and learning to design with type opens the door to designing everything. And Massimo Vignelli was famous for saying, if you can design one thing, you can design everything. And this is what he's referring to. Okay. Once you understand proportion, scale, balance, all that kind of stuff. So that's a building. That's how most buildings look. Not very interesting to me at all. Now look what happens when I delete some of these things or all of these things. I guess I should have just done it all at once. And you actually created a more interesting pattern for windows. For the sake of speed here. That the building had more interesting patterns of color or windows or something, it becomes a lot more interesting to look at. Just imagine everything snapped to that grid. And then you walked up on this building, and you'll see this now in modern architecture where buildings don't follow that same kind of repetition, that there's a breaking up of that grid line. Okay. I hope that answered. I probably confused more people than I helped right now. Apologize in advance, guys. All right, let's get back to this thing. Now, I'm not going to be able to critique everybody, so I'm going to kind of push through some of this here. We're going to discuss that layout. I actually like what's happening here. This is from Yoshinao Kumagai, that is using 1 point size. And I think they're using either grays or tints or shades. Shoot, let's see what this looks like. Where's my properties panel? Okay, so the opacity is 40%. And this is totally within the boundaries to create almost like a different weight of font by changing the transparency or the opacity of this type of bold. It almost feels like you're getting an extra weight in there. Okay. There's some things that are problematic here. I think you're double spacing, and double spacing, depending on the letters before and after, I think the characteristics in a space change. So you may want to find a different way to separate this. And here's one way you could do it. You could just do an underscore to separate the names. That's just one way. And it actually adds a little kind of visual element, something that Christina was using with dashes or minus symbols. You can use divider lines if you want. And there's a lot more that you can do here, okay? Okay, that doesn't look so good. What if I just delete that and I did something else? You don't always have to use spaces to separate things. You can use transparency. So if this were 40% and you alternated every other name, that could work. So there's a lot of options here. And if anything, if you're watching this, either participating part of this class or just watching live, just try things to kind of see what works, to break it. That should be your intention. Let me try and see if I can break it. And if I don't allow myself to use, working within a lot of constraints, what else can I do to make this layout work? How do I separate information? So now when you put in a space back in, it's even easier to read. Okay. I think that's all I wanted to say about this. I mean, I like that they're using the bold typeface and a much bigger point size than we've seen. And I think that's pretty cool. I think this layout would be improved a little bit if we just didn't push everything to the corner. So the top part being pushed to the corner is cool. I think we just need to find a way to bring this back in, and maybe then the layout works again. Again, I would encourage you to probably, oh, I see one kind of temporary, little bit of a problem here. You've decreased the tracking so much so that the letters start to touch together. That's called a ligature, I guess, in a way. And this is problematic here. You see this little triangle? Now, if you want to do that, there is a way to make that work. What I would encourage you to do is, I'm going to delete all this stuff. This is just an example here, is to try this. And this does work. And I've done this before and people get all crazy on me like, nah, that's not good design. Okay, sure, if you say so. Okay. If you have transparency like this, try to even get it to even be more overlapping, because then it looks more intentional versus just having a sliver. So it's one of those things where you don't want to be kind of aligned or kind of offset. You want to be really offset or really off alignment. And that's one way you can handle that. And I think if we were just to actually delete letters here, which we can do because it still works like that. Oops. There. With less letters, it's even easier to read. Okay, so that's how you make that work. So before and after, let's look at this, okay? There, that feels like a mistake, an oversight, whereas this, it's hard to say like that's not intentional. So just to be intentional with your design, okay? All right. Okay, this is the work of Mariana Monroy. And there's something here that's really cool. I just wanted to point out to everybody who's looking at the design. I really like how you handled this. The resin 8 kind of being to the power of 8 in parentheses and adding that to it. I think that's really clever. And I like to encourage other people to explore breaking your type up differently from layout to layout, just to create a lot of components to work with so that you can really play. The rest of it is just pretty standard, but I just really like that part and how you handled that. Okay, we talked about that one already. This is an interesting layout here from Yoon Kyun Choi, and I like the interlacing of the type, creating the different levels of tints or transparency to help break up the information. You can see it creates a nice little rhythm there. They picked one central axis to work off of, and okay, it's no surprise here, but you know what I'm going to do. Ooh, are there 2 point sizes here? Let's see, that's 12 point. Huh. What point size is this? That seems to be off. So you have one that's not 12 points. I'm going to make it 10 point. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to make it 8 point. I like what you did here. This is all caps. It lines up with the Journal for Graphic Design, telling the reader this is connected, but this is black. So there's a strong focal point there. And this is tracked out a lot more than this. So we're related, but we're different. I like that. Well done there. This person, Yoon Kyun, has decided that the January, February is very important to them. It probably isn't as important as they're making it, but that's their right to decide. Okay. If that's the case, what I would do is make this black and not this. There's something that's a little bit off for me in terms of like the hierarchy. If this were like this, I'm assuming that that's the same grid. Good. Okay. If that were like this, I think it would be a stronger layout. So the blackness of this would draw me here first, get me to look at this, and I would look at that as a third, and maybe move this around a little bit. Not sure where to put this just yet.
Is this a good candidate to talk about floor plan blueprints?
Yeah, I thought I already did that, but yeah, I just like, if we were to walk into this building, let's just say I'm going to draw a person right now. Okay. I'm going to draw a person and round off their shoulders a little bit and give them a head.
Getting high tech here, guys.
Super high tech, guys. All right, that's a person. And I'll give this person a nose. There. That's a nose in case anybody has the wrong idea. All right. And I'll give this person a red shirt or something so you can see them a little bit better. There's our person. Can you guys see that? So I'm going to group this person together. Now, as a person, I'm going to scale this person down. Okay, let's say they're walking into a cool exhibit in a museum and they're walking, okay? They're like, oh, this is really cool. They can check this out. They can walk around stuff and they can walk over here and look at this. That's like some interesting table display that you've got. To come back here, and I'm going to turn them around. Like, they look at this. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So there's a way for them to navigate around this thing. And you say, you're probably thinking to yourself, Chris, what's this got to do with typography? Well, your eye is not that different than this person. Your eye is going to travel around the design. And it goes from point to point looking at things. And there's scientific studies tracking people's eyes and how they look at layouts, understanding the relationship with these things. And if you were to put all of these things to the edges, well, you can see now there's not a lot of things for your eye to do. So it just goes to the edges. It goes over there, goes here, and then it's done. It doesn't seem as interesting to us. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to create something that's legible, but yet draw somebody in to look at it. If you can't stop somebody in terms of catching their attention and looking at what it is that you're doing, then all your beautiful type won't matter at all. So we have to create some kind of visual interest to draw people in. Okay. Whew. Okay, this is from Tony Gibbs. Tony, Here's one of your layouts here. I think, again, what's wrong? Too big, right? 12 point default. I like that you're using light. I'll just make this 10 because I don't hate 10. 12 is just so boring. Okay. And, ooh, grouping this stuff is a little funky. Let me ungroup that. Okay. Typically, when you do a layout like this, what I would recommend that you do is to keep everything in one paragraph group. And that way the leading will line up. Things will line up better. I'm not quite sure if you're doing this by hand, but it creates problems for you. So I want you to try this, Tony. If we were to take this and push it really far out, what happens? Well, we lose the connection between these things, and obviously that's impossible to read. So what happens if we go the other way? What if we bring it close? Okay, that's a relationship, but maybe not one that we want. And then what happens if we interlace it or weave it in? Oh, okay. That creates a little bit more kind of visual tension that I think is good. And that's probably how we can make this work. So that's a little bit more interesting. Now, there's this thing, like, is this hanging too far off the edge of this thing? I don't know. So what we should do is we should try to bring it in. But then I realize right now we have a small problem in that this is flush right and that's flush left. So if we were to make it both flush left, it probably would work a lot better. I can't do that right now because of the way this is laid out. So Tony, if you're going to continue doing this with us, what I would suggest in the future is to keep this in a paragraph grouping and not breaking out into individual lines. It'd be a lot easier for you to work with, okay? All right. Let's see, we already talked about that. I think we're kind of done here. Yeah, I think I've talked about everything on this page. So let me save this. Okay. I think we already went through this.
While you're doing that, Chris, we should remind everybody that's watching. So if you're wondering, how people submitted their designs and how Chris is critiquing them, these are, again, people from our Typography 01 class. So there are a series of exercises there, and we're critiquing week 1's exercise. We're going to continue with the remaining exercises. So if you're in the course, just look out for an email from me or join the Slack group for Typography 01, and then you'll see the request there.
Yeah, we're doing this again next week, right? And next week it's a little bit more interesting because we're going to open up the parameters a little bit. Do you remember what the next week's assignment is? The parameters, Mark?
I believe it's 2-point sizes.
2-point sizes. I mean, it's a world of opportunities now. Anyways, I'm going to get back into it real quick. I'm going to power through this in the next 6 or 7 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up. This is from Johannes Yellum, I think, or Jellum. Okay. Johannes has done something kind of interesting. He's made the paper itself a different color, shade of gray. And this will work on your computer, but when you go to print this thing out, it's going to be very problematic because you're going to see lots of little dots. Okay. But on the computer, it looks quite beautiful. It looks really nice. This is one of those things where I would encourage you to, Johannes, to really try more layouts, more configurations to do things that you think are not going to work. And when they break, find a way to make them work, because I'm seeing a little bit too much of the same, right? This looks like a kind of a nice letterhead here where everything's centered at the top and then you have these bits at the bottom. Not a lot of relationship pulling the eye towards these two things. And hopefully if you're still confused about this whole like floor plan idea, it's like there's an exhibit on the north side of the building and an exhibit on the south side of the building, but not a lot for me to go from one to the next. And my eye needs something, okay? And I think of your 3 layouts, probably this one is one of your more successful ones. Unfortunately, this has all been outlined, so I can't do a whole lot to it. Let me check. Yeah, it's all outlined right now. So unless, again, you're using an exotic version of Helvetica, not even necessary for something like this, just use standard old Helvetica and I can then work with it. So the alignment is kind of tricky, but just maybe a simple adjustment like that could make it look really good. So Johannes is doing a bunch of good things here, taking one axis and then offsetting this type a little bit, which is what we've been talking about, and creating 3 dominant groups with like 1 focal point. I like it. It's successful. Okay, moving on. Kento Yoshida. Kento. All right, let's look at yours. A lot of really interesting things that you're doing in here. The ones on the left and the right are your most successful layouts to me. And let's talk about, I'll start with the one on the left first then. Okay, I think I mentioned this earlier about using different devices to separate things. And I think it's quite interesting to be able to use these diagonal lines, these divider lines, slashes, and then to make them more opaque than the remaining artists. I think that's kind of cool. And that's what your eye looks at. So there's a really nice rhythm there. I think the layout would be stronger if you just saved this device, this diagonal line, just for the features. So I think repeating them up here and then making them fade out with transparency is actually not making it stronger. It's diminishing the power of this. Okay. I don't think you need this here nor here. Resonate. Okay. And then, okay. So now that I've changed that, this is feeling a little out of place here. I believe we could probably just take these two things. Is it command? What is it? Where's my alignment tools? Just align them like that and bring them back in and offset them like that. We want to simplify it, right? So it might be cool to take this and just move it down a little bit so that there's more separation. It's not working for me just yet. It's a game of proportion and just nudging things around. Shoot, there's too many things going on here. Where are my layers? I need to lock that background. Okay, good. So sometimes you have a long line like this, the Journal for Graphic Design. And what's happening is it's cutting off all this beautiful space around it. So in a case like that, the journal, maybe you just hit return here. And now you kind of change the way that this whole thing looks because you're giving yourself a lot more space to work with. So sometimes that works and sometimes the inverse works where you take this and I'm going to do something a little wacky right now, guys. It may make your eyes hurt a little bit, but let's see what happens. Now, most people see the page as a kind of two-dimensional thing, but what if you did something like this, where you continue a thought across the page? And that could work too. So your eye will follow this, resonate, the Journal for Graphic Design. Now, the one thing I don't like about this is that it cuts off the space, right? It's creating a space of a volume right here. And then it's creating a volume down here, which I don't like. It would be better if we could, I'm cheating here just to demonstrate what I'm talking about. I'm going to scale this down, right? It's already looking better just by doing that. And if I were to open it up like this, so that at least there's space to flow through. But you guys will find out soon enough in these exercises that using a smaller point size gives you so much more real estate to work with, because you can't change the page dimensions, but you can change the point size. Now, as soon as I say that, somebody's going to do a 3-point thing, which will be totally illegible. So just caution you, 6 points is probably the smallest you can make this. So I'm going to return this all back to normal. Okay. So I think that's a pretty good layout. And I like what you're doing here. When you find one trick, just use it sparingly. Don't try to replicate it everywhere. And in future weeks, when we start to open it up to more elements, I'll teach you how to use that one trick and make it tie to other things without overusing it. Okay. Here's another one here. Let me just look at this. Okay, pretty standard stuff. And Kento, I'm not sure if you're using the grid. It looks like you have a grid, but doesn't seem like you're obeying the grid. Not sure. Okay, this is like a what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8-column grid. Oh, you're using different grids for each one. Interesting. Okay. All right. I think here, again, watch. All I'm going to do is make this smaller and you'll see. Your layout will just get better. I'm not even going to change anything. All right. And I think your use of grays or transparency is actually really good here, because although there's a lot of information on the page, our eye will just see the things of greatest contrast. So the area of greatest contrast is right here. Let me do this so you guys can see that. It's right here. So that really jumps out because it's got a sea of black around it and just a little bit of white. So, okay, keep going down this path. Kenta, I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with next. So save this and close it. Okay, whose work is this? Kang, who we know, Kang. All right. Okay. So Kang, the risk of repeating myself quite a bit here, you see, you've come up with a really kind of interesting typeset here for the magazine, the masthead, and the date. Why are there so many boxes here? What the heck? Okay. So I guess you're using those for proportion and space, but next time just delete them or turn them to guides or something. And there's a really easy keyboard shortcut to turn things into guides, which I'm going to do right now with you. I'm going to select these and just hit Command 5, and it'll make them into guides. So they won't be there anymore, okay? Now you notice why, like before, I turn my guides into dots and not lines, because it's super annoying to look at all this. And so you can go back into your preferences, which is Command K, go to guides and grids and change them into dots. See, now you can actually see your design again when you do that. Okay, I'm going to hide the guides, which is Command colon or semicolon. All right, I think you've come up with something kind of nice here, and then you're using it again. So if you're going to submit 3 designs, let's go crazy here. And if you look at these 2 layouts, they're almost identical. There's not enough exploration. And all I can say is the more you push, the more you try, the more you fail, the more you're going to see yourself grow by leaps and bounds. Okay. So I would recommend that, because if you look at it, yeah, this is just that, but like this, you see the layout's almost the same. So the only difference here between these 2 layouts really is taking the type and pushing it on the edge. Okay. Now, if you do this on the edge here, try one where there's nothing else. It's just one thing. Like everything is super simple, but this one thing that you put on the edge. Okay. Yeah. Same way of breaking this information. You guys see that? All right. Let's try and break it up. Let's see what else you can come up with, Kang. I know you got it in you. Okay. We're down to the last 2. Joshua Gilly here. And okay. I think this layout is very nice. It's very simple. Also, Joshua is doing this thing where he's changed the paper color to like a shade of gray. And I think that creates an interesting visual here. It works for screen again. And when you go to print this out, it may not look so good to you. And if you're not sure, go ahead and hit it on your laser printer and see what happens. Okay. And other than that, I'm just trying to find like where this thing belongs. It feels a little bit out of place here. I think you made it centered to solve the problem. Like, I don't know what to do with it. I think it would work just as fine if you were to line it up with something like that. Rather than aligning it with a page, say to people, this relates to this, or this relates to this piece of information here, and be done with it. Now, once I do that, you're going to realize also very similar breakup of the body text here. So let's push it, Josh. Okay. Nicely done. I think you have good sensibility and an eye for design. I just want you to try more, especially because you're only submitting 3. Show me 3 radically different things, like one on the far left, one on the far right, and something wacky in the middle. Okay, last but not least, we have Mojo. Okay, Mojo is doing something really wacky here. So I applaud you for trying this, Mo, and that he's taking resonate and he's repeating it and using transparencies to kind of create this echoey, blurry, light leaking kind of thing. And he's doing it quite a bit, right? Maybe this is now, ooh, lots of copies. Okay. Here's what I'm going to say, Mo. Take this idea and make it the superstar and the hero. And that's it. By repeating it 3 times, you diminish the power of what it is that you're doing. If you just did this one trick and kept everything else really super simple, I think it might make for something interesting. I quite like this replication. Like, it's really kind of blurry and weird looking. If that were done for, say, the masthead or something else, I think that could be cool. And then make everything else subservient to that. Okay. In this one, see, this is what I mean. Like when I say go try stuff and break it, most definitely Mo is trying stuff and breaking it. So now Mo's thing is going to be to try to pull him back and show some restraint. So this is good for the discussion of what we're doing here today, you guys, because some people have stayed really tight in what they're going to explore. And some people like Mo are going bananas. And I like that. Now it's like Mo has to lean towards the middle a little bit, where everybody else has to lean a little bit more towards the edges. I like that you repeated the type here, using type as pattern and texture. Probably kind of tough to work with this, huh? Yeah. Okay. And then Mo's kind of deleted some of the type in here to help make this more legible. So I like the texture and the repetition. Again, if this were just like one giant block of copy instead of like trying to do this super dynamic layout, maybe that pattern repetition would be more successful for you. Okay. Okay, I think that's it for me. Let me close this. Thanks everybody for kind of joining us today to talk about type. And this is just week 1 of, I think, 7 weeks. We'll be back next week when we're allowed to use 2-point sizes. I think that's what Mark said. So when you go to do this next week, when you try 2-point sizes, try 2-point sizes that are radically different, like a really small one and a big one, and see what happens. See if you can make it work, and then bring them gradually closer together. Okay. And if you're also curious, when you're going to critique the work for next week, ask yourself, is there a clear focal point? Do I understand the order in which I'm supposed to look at things? Is there just like one element of surprise to break up the monotony of the layout? That's all you need. Repetition and contrast is the key. And make sure you have a lot of negative space. And the easiest way I know how to do that is just reduce the point size down. And as we progress, I'll probably get into the details a lot more than today. And I think that's it for me, Mark. I'm gonna hit stop share here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and also for Mark and Jonah for manning the remote broadcast team here. I hope you guys learned something, and I'm going to say goodbye to everybody right now. Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
People are asking, what are those plugins? The architecture plugin you
I knew.
People are asking.
All right, you crazy animals. Let me do it. Let me share that. Let me go back in there. Okay. Shoot. Sorry about that. I'm going to find a file here, and give me 1 second, Mark. Maybe you can read comments while I go and find a file that I can open up so they can see what the heck those little secret plugins are.
Okay. Yeah, so for some of you that may not be receiving the emails, there's a chance that you might have opted out of the emails in Teachable. So we'll try to get those to you. I think I see some people in the YouTube chat that didn't get the request. But hopefully you guys found this useful. Again, we're going to be doing this not exactly on a weekly basis, but we're going to go through all 7 weeks of the exercises. So just look out for the request. And again, if you're not in the course, we do have the course available. It's we've reduced the tuition due to the situation right now, but for those who are enrolled, we're offering the free critiques. So look out.
All right. I can't find my file right now, but I'm going to show you what the heck this is. It's from a company called Hot Door, and they make a plugin called CAD Tools. I'll write it on the screen in a second here. Okay. So those of you guys that are doing architecture design and don't want to use AutoCAD, there's a company called Hot Door, and the tool or the plugin is called CAD Tools. Let me make that bigger. Switch this back to Helvetica. Right. And I'll show you what it does. Okay, so I'm gonna pull out all this stuff now. Hide all this. Okay, where are my CAD tools? Okay, so you see the plugins here on my toolbox here that have all these red dots. That's what that is. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to go into CAD. I think the the document itself. Now, I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but you can see all these things that you can adjust and change, CAD walls, etc. I need to go and see a CAD documents here. Where is it? CAD tools. These are all the plugins here. So I want to look at my documents.
If you're not familiar with CAD, it's computer assisted aided drafting. So
drafting, yeah. Oh, Mark, I wasn't prepared to talk about this. I'll just show you to you really quickly.
Yeah. I don't think you have to go into depth. I think people are just wondering what it is and what it does.
Yeah, okay. So the CAD dimensions, all that stuff. So it is a tool to draw floor plans, buildings, and all that kind of stuff. And if you were to drag something open like this, let me switch this so you can see it. There's actually dimensions on this thing. And if I were to go to CAD dimensions, you can see it. But if I needed to draw everything in scale, like I'm designing a bookshelf or something, and I want to cut something, right? So if I go to CAD tracker, where is it? There it is. I can change the dimensions of this right here. So let's say it's saying it's 5.75 inches because I've not set it up correctly, but let's just say it needed to be a 4 foot by 8 foot thing, right? So let's say that's 4 foot by 8 foot. Right now it's 4 inches by 8 inches, but I can set up the scale. And then I can use this tool right here, which is their universal dimensioning tool. I can drag it out, and then I can drag it out here. And this is what I use to communicate with my general contractor. And as I keep drawing, it'll make more sense because I'm able to control and have very precise drawings and be able to adjust them kind of on the fly like this. And you can do little call outs like this. Here's a call out. So anybody familiar with architecture will know what I'm doing, and it's set up like that. It's pretty cool. And notice that the numbers are changing automatically for me. That's part of the program. And they have things to help you draw walls, and it's pretty cool, or even to draw doors and intersections and to do an offset. This used to be more interesting, like before you have all these other tools, but I can offset something, and you notice that when it's offsetting, it's saying 0.64 inches, 0.7, and that's consistent all the way around. So those things are kind of quite important in order to be able to keep things proportionate versus sometimes when you draw a box on another box and you scale it up. Watch, I'll show you what I mean. If I take this box and I use, let me delete this. If I take this box and I use the scale, even though I'm scaling up proportionately, you'll notice something here. What's the difference here? Well, it's longer than it is tall. So this part scales out and looks much bigger than the top and bottom. So that's where the offset tool comes in handy. Now, Illustrator has these tools built in too, but that's what it is. That's all. No secret design plugins, guys. It's just for drafting, and that's it. Any last questions, Mark? I'm tired.
Well, we have 10 more. No, just kidding. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll let Chris sign it off, but thanks for joining and submitting. Look out for the next request for submissions.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I know that could be kind of dry to be staring at type, but for the people who do love this kind of stuff, I hope you learned something. I hope that by next week, you guys try and push the boundaries. I'm really excited and looking forward to it. And if your work wasn't critiqued this week, please do not feel bad. There were over 50 submissions, and there's only so much time that we have. One of the reasons why your work may not have been picked is because you broke the rules. And it was clear that you broke the rules. You used shapes and used lines and all kinds of stuff. We don't want you to do that right now. There will be a time and place for you to do that. Don't do it right now. And when you submit your 3 layouts, just submit 3 using the template. If you don't use the template and if you submit more than 3, I'm not going to look at it. I'm just going to tell you right now. All right. Until next time, guys, be well. Take care of yourself.